So I'm a big fan of Seinfeld, and as you're watching or listening right now, an episode of Seinfeld is being played somewhere around the world. And the reason being it's because it is in broadcast syndication, which is really a hallmark for any television show. They've had at least 100 episodes, and now till the future, till whenever, that show is being played and continuing to develop income. Then there's real estate in syndication, which essentially was crowdfunding before crowdfunding even got started, where a bunch of investors come together. Someone has done their due diligence to find properties so that they can have financial success from years to come. And if you're someone who wants to invest in real estate, but not necessarily want to be hands on in terms of managing tenants, handling repairs, then real estate syndication might be the best avenue for you while still reaping the financial rewards. And today on this program, we've got an expert. She's an internist and the founder of Real Estate Physician, and she's going to answer all your questions on real estate syndication. No, it's not Newman, it's Dr. Chen on this episode of Bootstrap MD. Hey guys, it's Dr. Mike Wu Ming. Welcome to another edition of Bootstrap MD. Now, if this is your first time, welcome. This is the podcast for physician entrepreneurs and investors. And we've done over 100 episodes on Bootstrap MD podcast. And probably one of our more popular topics is when we talk about real estate. And it always seems to be a topic we get, and the most downloaded episode we get usually focuses on some type of real estate. And we're really lucky to have an expert to talk about this particular part of real estate that you may have been curious about and you want to know more about. And that's about real estate syndications. And she's also an expert on commercial real estate, which is also a topic that I know many of you have a lot of interest in. So I'd like to introduce my next guest to the program. She is not only an investor, she's also a physician, investor, and entrepreneur. Dr. Chen received her MD at Texas A&M College of Medicine with honors, completed her internal medicine training at Oregon Health and Science University. And in 2018, she founded The Real Estate Physician, which empowers physician colleagues in commercial real estate investments through syndication. The Real Estate Physician is a physician-forward resource with a vision to empower a community of physician investors to achieve greater financial independence. That's something we all want, so we can have the freedom to practice medicine on our own terms. And now serves over 1,400 physician members. So I'd like to introduce to the show Dr. Chen. Cherry, how are you doing today?
Great, Mike. Thank you for having me. And it's just great connecting with other physicians, right? We're the same tribe. Hopefully we'll have a great conversation and just look to share information with other colleagues.
This is awesome. And like I mentioned at the top, real estate is a topic that we get a lot of interest in, a lot of downloads about. But then there are always people, as we talked about even before the show, who are still want to know how to get into it. And last time I checked, real estate investing wasn't a medical school course. I don't know if they changed the curriculum. I've been out for a while. But how did you get involved in real estate?
No, great question. I graduated residency in 2015. So med school 2008, 2012. And no, that was not a course. I don't think we had anything. I don't know if curriculums have changed now, but certainly I think we come from the same area. You were all in medicine. We didn't have any other training. And so really the onus does, fall on you as an individual. And I think when you're an attending and you start working, you start realizing, hey, there's not a class or no one's going to tell me what to do. And really, most of us hear the same things like 401k, invest in your company retirement plan, whatever that may entail. And that's really all we have. So I came from the same area. And then I basically was just curious after becoming an attending. Okay, thankfully we can, maximize our 401ks or whatnot. And then you say, okay, what else? What is my next step? And so because finances, I think are so unique and personal as far as any debt or your investment goals or your timeline. But so I just started out really wanting to ask myself, okay, what else can I do with my money, or what else is there? And real estate was just something I was exploring. It wasn't like I was even targeting real estate. And real estate is such a broad term. I think when we think of real estate, we all think, oh, we're going to go get a single family rental, rent it out, put it on Airbnb, make it really nice. And that's really all I was thinking. I didn't know anything else. And so I didn't know any of the tax benefits, any metrics that you would look at for investment. I was purely just exploring. And I think the great part now is today we have podcasts, we have blogs, we have books, forums, everything is out there. So I just took advantage of all those free resources and started educating myself, basically. Yeah.
So there's, like you said, there's a lot of resources out there, but it can also be information overwhelm too. When
Yeah.
did you decide to like research to actually say, okay, I'm going to put my hard-earned money and invest in real estate property?
Yeah, so I think so going back in, I was thinking, okay, a single family rental, that'd be cool. And so I just started reading and learning more about real estate more broadly. And that was when I learned or came upon, oh, there is such thing as a multifamily, meaning apartment. And I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I didn't know I could invest into that as an
Right.
individual. So it just came out question after question, learning after learning, and seeing how, oh, okay, rather than going out and finding one single property, having to sign on the loan, having to carry the liability, having one tenant or zero tenants versus, okay, I could take the same amount of money or not even as much money, put it into a big apartment complex where somebody can professionally manage it. And I don't have to go manage the property myself because I'm a full-time physician. Certain aspects of that made sense as far as I didn't have to spend time managing a property. And so I just then went, the next step was, okay, talk to somebody who does this, talk to somebody who's invested this before. And I think that's helped me not to get too overwhelmed. Educate yourself a little bit first and just find that person who's done what you've done and take that next step. And that's why I eventually really created the real estate physician group, because there was nothing out there really for physicians in real estate syndications. And you just kind of need somebody to share a little bit with you. Because like you said, there's just a lot of information out there.
Yeah, it definitely. And just from my own personal experience, I like to have real estate investment experts like yourself on there because I said I could tell you how to lose money in real estate. You can do what I did and invest in 2009 during the housing crash, which I did. And I really wish I had a resource like what your group has. Is I've invested in property. It was single family homes. It was in Missouri. I live in California. So it was difficult, and really it was just like we had, of course, we had property management to do it, and
Mhm.
everything sounds great about real estate, but then you actually have to talk about like how do you handle tenants. And I had tenants who unfortunately ran off.
Uh,
Sometimes they can't pay, and sometimes I remember just I'm like, I made this investment and I'm just writing a check to this company, the property management company, because something broke or whatever. And you're right. It would have been nice to have people who like have done this before to try to do it. Eventually it sold it and I kept a few things, but eventually it sold it. Did you have like family members or friends who showed you the way, or how did it work for you?
no, no, because I've never invested in real estate otherwise. And I didn't really hang out with real estate investors. So my next step was to go to a local meetup, and these are just meetups for everything under the sun, right? So I went to one about real estate, went to a conference about real estate syndication, since that
Mhm.
piqued my interest on how to be a passive investor rather than being
Okay.
active. So I got educated there, then met people right in this space who do this, and then you can ask them more questions. Then you meet sponsors who are the people we call the general partners or sponsors who head these projects. And so you can actually meet them, talk to them, get to know them, and see what kinds of projects they do. And then you can go analyze their projects, right? So there's multi steps involved, but all of that is very accessible, especially in today's age where you can set up a call with somebody, you can see what properties they've done, etc. Yeah, I didn't really know anybody else doing it. And so I kind of just took it upon myself because it's your money, right? And no one's else gonna care about it more than you do, and it's your hard-earned money. And so I think that's what, as we come from residency into attending and we grow in our careers, you have to be responsible for that. Yeah.
Exactly. And I didn't know. And so this is all news to me in terms of syndication. And it sounds like something that I would have liked to have. Sometimes we do glamorize real estate. We invested houses. So I had a bunch of houses and, oh, that's all great. And
Yeah.
it's building in income, but they don't talk about what you do if somebody stops paying rent? What do you do if the air conditioning doesn't work? So I'm writing a check for that. And then, okay,
Right.
maybe this isn't the best way for a busy physician to try to do. Tell us more. What is syndications, and is that a good fit for Dr. Maybe why may not be a good fit?
Yeah, no, great question. So basically, single family or multifamily syndications typically talk about larger projects, right? These are just vehicles, so it really depends on the person. I've heard great stories and horror stories about both. So just to be as objective as possible, but really the biggest difference is I think for us as physicians, or if you're full-time clinical, the biggest factor is, I think a good branching point is, do you want to be active or do you want to be passive? Do you want to go be in charge of looking at the property, signing on the loan? If anything comes up, you have to talk to your property management, or you go fix it yourself if you don't want to hire a property manager. You have liability if the tenant leaves, it's you got to fill it, or you're in charge of all the expenses. And a big one I hear from other investors as well, if you're cash flowing $200 at the end of the month after paying taxes and everything else, that's pretty good. But you got to also keep reserves, right? So what if a tenant or some equipment goes bad and you need to make a $5,000 or $3,000 repair? That cuts into all of your cash reserves you've been saving from your $200 cash flow, right?
Maybe a storm hits a roof and you got to repair the roof. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
and so there's it's not all glam, right? There's
Right.
actually somebody living in these properties. And so I think the easiest branching point is like, do I want to be active or do I want to be passive? And I think most of us, and why syndications has become more of a popular topic, is most of us do prefer to be passive. I think so. Of course, there's across the whole spectrum. So then when you want to be passive, and another part I think is important is thinking about risk, right? When, of course, right, we're talking about investing our money. So we say, okay, what is the best way I can actually put this money to work in, right, a less risky way, right? Risk is subjective and also across spectrum. But what made me feel comfortable in doing a lot of these multifamily projects is thinking about risk. I have a 1-unit property or a 100-unit property. If one person leaves my 1 unit, I'm at 0% occupancy. If one person leaves my 100 unit, I'm at 99% occupancy. I can still make my payments. I can still make distributions to investors. The property still runs just fine. So you have the economies of scale. And so just thinking about that way, hey, why would I put my $50,000 or $100,000 in 1 unit when I could be leveraged into 100 units, if you will? So I think from a risk or investment standpoint, that made me feel safer as well. So I think, being passive and talking about just liability. And when you are as a passive investor, you don't have any liability, right? You're not actively managing the property. Somebody else is doing that on your behalf. So you don't have to sign on the loan. You don't have to carry any liability. So all of those benefits that you would have had to be responsible for if you owned your own property. But the nice part is when you're a passive investor, you still have the tax benefits as if you own the real estate yourself, because you are investing your $50,000, for example, into a piece of property. You just have a smaller share, but you still own real estate. So those are some of the things to consider.
And also too, and probably some of these properties, a regular physician, although we make pretty good money, it may be out of the reach for some of these to be able to acquire, correct?
Yeah, and that's why syndications is just meaning, hey, people are coming together, right? Pooling their resources, whether it's capital, whether it's time or expertise, right? Yeah, we can go purchase a single family home, but most of us, unless we're sitting on millions, most of us can't go out and purchase a 100-unit complex, right? So a syndication is designed to say, hey, we can combine 50 investors, for example, and you each contribute 50. Now, instead of your $50,000 working in 1 unit in a single family, you can be part of a much nicer, bigger project that's professionally managed because it's 100 or 200 units. So you can't do that on your own. Most of us can't. But if we have a syndication and we combine people together, we can make that happen.
Remember when you could practice medicine on your own terms? What if you could take control of your physician career, make more money while working smarter, not harder? Pick up your copy of The Positioned Physician. Earn more, work smart, and love medicine again. Now updated for 2021, The Positioned Physician details one doctor's journey from burnt-out employee to successful entrepreneur. Whether you are in residency, in mid-career, or close to retirement, after reading The Positioned Physician, you'll gain the knowledge that can strategically impact your doctor life. The Positioned Physician, now available on Amazon Kindle and paperback.
And this is probably a topic for another time, but how do you go about, as a syndication, determining what are good quality properties to invest in?
Yeah, so yeah, we could go on forever about that, but syndication is just right pulling together. Then you say, hey, I'm interested, I want to be passive. Then you still have to know, hey, what kind of projects do I want to invest my money into? Because you could put it into an apartment. Even in an apartment, they're the most common because everyone lives somewhere, and most of us have that experience probably through med school or residency. But even there, you have really new apartments, you have in the middle apartments, and then you have really old apartments. And so then you have to educate yourself, okay, what are maybe some of the subtle differences of why I would put my money into a specific project? Yeah.
Now, one thing that there is question on, and I see a lot about it, is being a accredited investor. So help us. I understand generally you need about 50,000 to invest in, but there are some income things that you need to reach. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so basically, accredited investor is just it's something that United States government, the SEC, Securities Exchange Commission, has set out a definition for. So I think a lot of physicians, when they see, oh, are you accredited investor, they think it's something you have to take a test for, or you have to go,
Another
get a letter and say I'm certified in something. But it's purely based off your financials, and the way the U.S. government set this definition is that, hey, if you're an individual who makes greater than 200,000 annual income a year for the last 2 years, or if you file jointly greater than $300,000 a year annual income, or if you have $1 million in net worth, not counting your primary home. So that is the typical definition you'll see. There is no, leeway about it. It's yes or no. And basically it's a government's way of saying, okay, at least you make enough money. Even if you're going into an investment and you lose it, you can recoup, right? We're not that concerned about you. And so that's why it exists there, to protect people. And so that's what accredited means. Some of these deals you'll see, hey, you have to be an accredited investor. Not all of the deals are like that, but that's why it exists. Yeah.
So I'm at your website right now, therealestatephysician.com, and I'm clicking on portfolio. And at the time of the recording, we've got home parks, we got self-storage units, and I'm particularly interested in that because no one has really talked about commercial real estate. So talk about, let's say we'll talk about self-storage.
Yeah.
Why do you like self-storage, and what has been your experience with it?
Yeah. So yeah, I have invested a ton in apartments, multifamily, self-storage is another great one. Basically, why those asset classes, right? So they're different asset classes, but they're both commercial properties. They have multiple units typically. And basically, they have proven themselves through the 2008 economy and during good times, bad times to be actually pretty resilient in terms of, in good times and bad times, your investment dollars have done better than many other asset classes. And basically, self-storage, you can look at it, right? You have a garage above the ground. It's different in apartments where you don't have tenants. You don't have to fix a microwave. You don't have to upgrade the units to make it all beautiful for people to live in there. So your expenses in a self-storage are not so much compared to an apartment. You don't have as much upkeep, right? Maintenance, leasing. There's not that much to do when people just put their stuff in and store it. And so that's why these assets have done really well as well, because you can basically, there's not much to do in terms of operations, right? Some of the subtleties between that and apartment, beyond that, is a self-storage, typically they can change the rates every month, right? Based on supply and demand, versus apartment. When you sign a lease, it's typically 9-year, 12-month lease. So you're stuck there, right? For self-storage, they can increase that rent every month. It's very, very much based on current demand and supply ratio of what the market's doing. So that's why even if your self-storage goes from $50 to $55, you as a customer, I as a customer would be like, whatever, that's fine. I'm not going to pick up and move to a different self-storage facility. But that basically just increased the income of that specific unit up by 10%. You can't do that with an apartment. So that's why the returns have also been really good with self-storage without a lot of the headaches you would have of having tenants as well.
And I actually looked into this 5 or 6 years ago. I had a friend who was involved in self-storage, And I don't know if he was just blowing smoke at me and just kind of ignoring, but he said self-storage is great to be in, like what you said, great rate of return. You don't have to worry about them not paying the rent on time in general, or something breaks down. But it can be hard to get into, like there's not a lot available. And so the people who have it already, they want to keep it. And that might be where a syndication may be able to introduce you to that. Is that correct? What's been your experience?
Yeah, because we're talking about commercial or lots of properties versus
Yeah,
single family where we're all used to, oh, I'll just find a broker or I'll find
right.
somebody to show me and I can get it. But commercial properties, when you're talking about millions, multi-million dollars, a broker, you have to know people, right? You have the broker. It's a much more professional and a business type of relationship. When you're buying an apartment, usually we like to hold these properties, right, for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, for example. You're basically buying a piece of business, right? The broker that's saying, hey, can I trust you to purchase this $30 million property? And I trust that you will run the project, take care of the tenants because I'm in this community, right? So it's not just, oh, you want the single family, you have the money, you will get your loan and then you're good, right?
So this is great. I also wanted to touch on manufactured home parks. What's been your experience? What are the pros and cons with home parks?
Yeah, so that's one of the other asset classes. We're in apartments, self-storage, mobile home parks. Once again, it's housing, right? It's housing. And our group in particular, we don't do any hotels or restaurants or shopping because it's not as, I would say, an evergreen need for those assets and they're more volatile, right? Housing tends to be pretty stable and predictable. That's why I personally prefer them. And so just some differences. Once again, mobile home parks are typically multi-units, right? You have 20, 30, 40, 50 lots, for example. And so that's why it falls within this commercial real estate. A big difference and why it's done so well is because they're really hard to build. The United States government, usually cities and zoning committees, they don't really want you to come and build a mobile home park next to you. There are really not much supply. There's really not much supply because you can't just say, I want to build a mobile home park and it's done. But the demand continues to grow. So it's like an ever increasing demand and an ever decreasing supply, if you will, because mobile home parks are affordable housing. A lot of these parks are $200, $300 a month rent. There's always going to be a need for it and it always will be and a growing need, but you can't build anymore. So that's what makes it, if you will, an attractive investment thesis in terms of just supply and demand. And once again, it's housing. Another difference, just so people get a better understanding, is typically these residents own their own mobile home parks, right? So they take care of their own mobile homes versus an apartment. You as a landlord, if you will, in these projects will have to take care of it. So typically, if you're an investor in a mobile home park, you take care of the parking lot, the grass, like the utilities, making sure it's a nice and safe place to live, but you don't have to do anything within the mobile homes because the tenants take care of it of themselves typically.
Now, I know it's hard to say it, and again, I should have prefaced at the beginning, this is for educational purposes only, but what can we think of as a potential rate of return for being in a syndication?
Yeah, so that's going to, obviously, this is just general information, but it depends on, once again, like if you're buying a really new property or a really old property and what you tend to do. But in general, a good number is, hey, if you invest, for example, $50,000, which is the typical minimum to be in a private syndication, we're going to hold your money for about 5 years. Over that 5-year time period, we're going to look to close to doubling that investment. Okay,
Wow.
that's what's achievable. That's what's been done. And every project will be a little bit different from there. And what that 2 extra money is going to come from is some of the cash flow from the property. It's operating, people live in them, they make rent, and we can make distributions to investors. So it's not like you don't get anything for 5 years and then you double your money. As we hold the project, you'll get some cash flow, which is how we get the term passive income. And then as we improve on the property over time and bring the value up when we sell it, you also get a big chunk at the end when we sell the property. So that's just general numbers, and it'll vary depending on the project.
And maybe you could speak, I know you're not a CPA, but what are some tax advantages by investing your money through these vehicles?
Yeah, I am definitely not a CPA. Gosh, I could never. So yeah, so the big thing is that it's real estate, right? You're investing in real estate. And so typically people have heard of depreciation. So even your single family home, you have depreciation. Basically, anybody that owns real estate falls into this category and you can all benefit from, right? And that's really because there's incentives for the government to say, hey, you're providing housing. You are providing a community, a safe place for people to live in, and you have that benefit. And that's what allows you to get depreciation, which just means, hey, we're going to take the value of this asset, right, over time, like your car depreciates. It just depreciates the wrong way. But basically, we're saying, hey, if you buy this $1 million building, we're going to depreciate the value on paper over time. And then we can deduct that value from your income from the property or your investment. And so typically, that depreciation number is going to be bigger than your income from the project. So when you report your income, you're going to get an official tax document that you will present to your CPA and file with the IRS. It's called a K-1 tax form that says, hey, even though you got $5,000 from this investment, because you own real estate and you get depreciation from it, let's say $10,000, you don't have to pay any taxes because you have no reportable net income from this project. Just in general.
I'm very familiar with that as a single family investor. So why you're still keeping it is, there are times that it was vacant, but exactly what you said, I get to be able to write that off. And come tax time, that's when it really helped out. So it's good to know. And I didn't know that a syndication still offers those type of benefits. I think that's really important for the listeners to understand.
Yeah, I think so, because you would get those same benefits as if you own the property yourself. And so that's really nice. And because that's one big difference between a syndication or if you own your project your own, versus what a lot of people have exposure to is REITs, real estate investment trusts, from your stocks from Wall Street. That you don't get this benefit because you're not owning shares in a company, you're not owning directly real estate. So that you are taxed ordinary income levels for any of your dividends or whatever. So that's a huge difference in terms of, you say, oh, I invest in REITs, I already have real estate. So that's a fine distinction.
Yeah, I know my number of listeners are going to be coming in and they're going to be going to the website, therealestatephysician.com. They join up. What can they expect? What's the process to be involved? How does that work?
Yeah, so basically I created the platform to be one, let's learn about syndication and see if it's a good fit for me before saying, oh, hey, here's a hot opportunity, double your money. And if it's right for you, your money is illiquid for 5 years. Does that make sense for me? So when people sign up, they'll get an email from me. I wrote like a 70-page guide about syndications for beginners, right? Like I consider it a good primer foundation. So if you've never heard of syndications, it's going to be your first time. You can read through the 70 pages in 2 to 3 hours and be like, okay, I get it. Like, okay, this does seem like a good idea, but at least you've had a good information. So you'll get a copy of that for free. And then typically it's schedule a call with me, right? Like you say, okay, Cherry, this makes sense. I think it makes sense for me financially. And then the second step, how we designed the platform, is what most physicians face as well. I want to invest, but where do I go invest? Or how do I know if it's a good deal? How do I trust who I'm investing with? Which is all very important questions. The way we built our platform is then to try to find the really good operators in good cities doing good projects. And if we feel like these are really solid projects, we've done our homework, we know who we are investing with, then I will share those opportunities with anyone who said, okay, yeah, I do want to invest, but I don't know how to invest or who to invest with, and then guide you through that process of what that will look like.
Okay. And you steer them and say which property may or may not be a good fit for you, or you just say, what in terms of the physician who wants to invest in, do they have any say on what's involved? How does that work? Because I'm sure you get that all the time.
Yeah. So basically, I'm not a crowdfunding site. You're not going to see 100 deals, and it's not a marketing site whatsoever. You're going to see 4 to 6 deals throughout the year, because those are ones I can feel confident I've done my homework. I know the sponsors. We know how we underwrote the project. We understand all the financials of the project. And so I present all of that. I tell a lot of our members, I'm trying to do as much of the due diligence for you, but I can't obviously replace you, and it's your hard-earned money. I present that to you. You can look through it all. And of course, it's totally on you if you want to invest in the project or say pass, or you're just not ready. But then this way you have exposure, and you can see that the couple deals we send, at least we'll have a good amount of homework done for you in advance, and rather than logging into a crowdfunding site and seeing 100 deals, because they're not all created equal. And I think that's where people get into trouble.
And I think there's advantage that you are a physician. Most of my listeners are physicians. It is colleague to colleague. I think there is that trust and respect that we have. And some of these crowdfunding sites, although there's certainly a place, they might not be able to say the same thing.
Yeah, so one big, just so people know, crowdfunding versus private syndications, right? Because as a new investor, you're going to see, oh, hey, I can invest in an apartment here. What's the difference? And so just for beginners to understand, is a crowdfunding site, they're a platform, right? I would say they're a technology platform helping facilitate a real estate transaction. Doesn't mean they're good deals or bad deals, irrespective of what types of deals. They're not the ones investing money into the project. They're not running the project. They don't stay with you through the project. So to take that into consideration, because you're going to be in it in 5 years, it's good to know, you're right, who you're investing your money into. And that's why private syndications exist, where, hey, I know who I'm investing my money with. I know who I can go to, and they know me. So that's a big difference. But why crowdfunding sites exist is because you can invest with $1,000, $5,000. So you can get some exposure. I just want investors to know, then you have to do a little more homework, right? Because all the returns can look similar, but not every deal is created equal. So you have to, dig a little further. Yeah.
The site is therealestatephysician.com. Dr. Chen, thank you for sharing this knowledge with us. It's definitely exposed my eyes to real estate investing, and it just shows what is available. Certainly there's a place if you want to invest in. I think if you're handy or you have a team that can do the rehab, that's not me.
Yeah, not me at all.
It wasn't me at all, but having the opportunity
Yeah.
to take advantage of not only the tax benefits, but in terms of potential income that can receive, passive income received, certainly looks like real estate syndication is the way to go. Any last minute words before we end the call today?
No, I think it's just for us, other physician colleagues, right? It's not, hey, should I do a syndication or not? I think the best next step all of us can do is say, hey, what do I want my money to do? Because real estate and syndication is a vehicle. And so you have to find the right vehicle for your money, right? What is the goal for this pot of money? Or what is the goal for this pot of money? And another thing I always like to consider, right? It's not always about money, right? It's not always about returns. And that's where I see some physicians get into trouble, because to think about the opportunity cost of not only your financial capital, but of your time, of your energy, of yourself. And that's why I think syndications tends to be a good fit, because you don't have that much time, and the time you do, you probably don't want to go manage a property. And so to think beyond, when you're looking at investment, beyond just absolute financial returns, think of how it affects other parts of your life. And I think that's important for all of us to consider.
Yeah, that time, that is one thing that you can't get back.
Exactly.
Certainly for sure. Dr. Chen, thank you for joining us on the call. And thanks to you guys for listening. Thank you again for listening to Bootstrap MD. We talk about all different sources of income, but not only passive source of income, passive source of getting you back more time. But it's not only just about researching it and understanding. Sometimes you just have to go out there and do it. Check out our website, therealestatephysician.com. And as always, guys, keep moving forward. Hey, Dr. Mike Meng with Bootstrap MD. Thanks for listening to the program. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I encourage you to go and please leave and rate or review this podcast to wherever you're listening to it. It really helps me out, and it really helps me spread the benefits of physician entrepreneurship. Really appreciate it, and thanks again for listening.